Imagine finding out that the people who act completely comfortable around you have a very different conversation when you're not in the room. Suddenly, those confident little smiles don't look so confident anymore. Those private opinions, those whispers, those carefully recorded voice notes where they thought nobody would ever hear the truth, all revealing something they never intended to show. And the funniest part isn't even what they said. It's the realization that while they were busy discussing you, you were busy becoming someone they couldn't easily understand. They thought you were unaware. They thought you wouldn't notice the change in their behavior, the sudden awkwardness, the strange questions, the way certain people became nervous whenever your name came up. But people are terrible at hiding patterns forever. They can control a sentence. They can rehearse a conversation. They can pretend everything is normal. But eventually the cracks appear, and when they do, you learn something valuable. Never confuse someone's friendly face with the complete truth of what they think. That doesn't mean everyone is secretly against you. Don't become obsessed with imaginary enemies. It means you learn to pay attention to consistency instead of trusting appearances blindly. Maybe those private conversations reveal jealousy. Maybe they reveal fear. Maybe they reveal that someone underestimated you and suddenly doesn't know what to do with the person you're becoming. Or maybe they reveal nothing important at all. That's why you don't build your entire reality around rumors or leaked conversations. You look for patterns. You look at behavior. You ask yourself whether the information actually matters to your life or whether it's just another distraction designed to drag your attention backward. Because here's the real twisty. You don't need to know everything people say about you. You don't need access to every private opinion. You don't need to chase every whisper through every room. Let people talk. People always talk. Sometimes they're bored. Sometimes they're insecure. Sometimes they're projecting their own fears onto somebody else. And sometimes they're simply fascinated by someone who stopped playing the role they expected. The strongest response isn't revenge. It isn't exposing everyone. It isn't running around demanding explanations. It's becoming so grounded that somebody else's private opinion can't determine your public direction. They can call you arrogant, strange, lucky, difficult, intimidating, or whatever word makes their story easier to understand. You don't have to accept their label. You only have to remain honest with yourself. Because while they're spending energy discussing your life, you're spending yours actually living it, building your discipline, protecting your peace, improving your character, and becoming less dependent on the approval of people who only feel comfortable when they think they understand exactly who you are, while the conversations they thought would stay hidden become less important than the person you continue becoming when nobody is talking about you at all. People say the strangest things when they believe nobody is listening. Suddenly the confidence disappears, the polite smiles come off, and the version of the story they tell behind closed doors sounds completely different from the one they perform in public. And that's where you learn something important. People can control their words when they know they're being watched. Their patterns are much harder to control forever. Maybe you hear that someone has been criticizing you, questioning your decisions, or talking about how you've changed. Maybe you discover that somebody who acts supportive around you has been telling a completely different story somewhere else. It can sting. Of course it can. You're human, not a statue in a museum. But don't make the mistake of letting one private conversation become the definition of your entire reality. People talk for thousands of reasons. Some talk because they're jealous. Some talk because they're insecure. Some talk because they're confused. Some talk because they simply don't know how to communicate directly. And sometimes people say things in private that they later regret. That's why the smartest response isn't immediate outrage. It's observation. Ask yourself what the information actually tells you. Is there a repeated pattern of disrespect? Has this person consistently acted differently from what they claim? Or did you hear one comment that may have been taken completely out of context? Because there's a difference between information and interpretation. Information tells you what happened. Interpretation tells you what you think it means. Mixing the two can create a beautiful little disaster inside your head. Don't let that happen. Stay grounded. If someone's private words reveal genuine disrespect, you don't need to chase them around demanding an explanation. You can simply adjust your level of trust. Maybe you stop sharing personal plans. Maybe you become more selective about what you discuss. Maybe you keep some distance. That's not revenge. That's information changing your decision. And here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. You don't have to expose every person who talks about you. Sometimes people reveal themselves naturally when you stop giving them access. They realize they don't know what you're planning anymore. They don't know what you're thinking anymore. They don't know what you're worried about anymore. And suddenly, the information they once had about you disappears. Good. Privacy isn't weakness. You are allowed to have parts of your life that don't belong to the public. You don't need to explain every move to every person who asks. You don't need to give everyone a backstage pass simply because they once stood close to you. Let people have their opinions. Let them whisper. Let them misunderstand you if they insist. Your job is not to control every story being told about you. Your job is to control the story you are actually living. Keep your standards. Keep your discipline. Keep your focus. And if somebody's private words reveal that they never respected you as much as they pretended, accept the information without allowing it to destroy your peace. Because sometimes the most valuable thing a hidden conversation can give you isn't revenge or satisfaction, but clarity. The clarity to stop giving trust where it isn't earned. The clarity to recognize who deserves access to your life. And the clarity to keep moving without wasting your future trying to rewrite somebody else's private opinion of you. While they continue talking about the version of you they think they understand, and you continue becoming someone their old assumptions were never prepared to recognize. Rumors are fascinating little creatures. They can start with one sentence, grow legs, put on a suit, and somehow arrive 3 neighborhoods away, wearing a completely different story. Someone says they heard something about you. Somebody else adds a detail. Another person adds an opinion. And suddenly everyone is acting like they witnessed the entire event personally. And if you're not careful, you'll start living according to a story nobody can even prove is true. That's the trap. When you hear whispers about yourself, the first instinct is usually to investigate everything. Who said it? Why did they say it? Who else knows? What are they planning? Suddenly your entire brain becomes a detective agency with no lunch break. But before you let that happen, stop. Ask a much simpler question. What do I actually know? Not what you suspect. Not what someone told you they heard. Not what you think their facial expression meant. What do you actually know? Because there is a massive difference between evidence and imagination. One gives you information. The other gives you anxiety wearing a clever disguise. You don't need to chase every rumor, because most rumors collapse when you stop feeding them attention. If someone genuinely has a problem with you, their consistent behavior will eventually show it. If someone is simply talking because they're bored, they'll eventually find another topic. Either way, you don't need to make every whisper your personal emergency. Protect your attention. That's one of the most valuable things you own. Every minute you spend obsessing over what somebody might be saying is a minute you're not spending on your own goals, relationships, health, work, creativity, or peace. And that's exactly why rumors can become so destructive. They don't need to be true to distract you. They only need to make you emotional enough to stop focusing on your life. So don't give them that power. If you hear something concerning, verify it calmly. If there's evidence, deal with the actual issue. If there's no evidence, don't build a courtroom inside your head. Let uncertainty remain uncertainty until you have something real. That's emotional discipline. You don't need to know everything. You need to know enough to make wise decisions. And sometimes the wisest decision is simply to keep moving. People who genuinely care about you will usually communicate directly. People who consistently create confusion may be telling you something about themselves. Pay attention to patterns, not isolated comments. If someone repeatedly lies, manipulates, or disrespects you, you don't need a rumor to justify distance. Their behavior is already enough information. But if someone makes one strange comment, or you hear an unverified story, don't destroy a relationship based on a guess. That's how unnecessary drama gets created. Stay calm, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, you don't have to defend yourself against every version of you that exists inside somebody else's imagination. They are allowed to misunderstand you. They are allowed to have opinions. They are allowed to tell stories you don't like. You are allowed to keep living according to your values anyway, because the strongest response to a rumor isn't always a perfect explanation or a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let an unverified story hijack your attention while you continue building a life based on facts, character, discipline, and actions that speak for themselves long after the whispers have found somebody else to talk about. The funny thing about other people's fear is that they often expect you to manage it for them. They become uncomfortable because you're changing, because you're becoming more confident, because you're setting boundaries, because you're no longer asking permission to take your own life seriously, and somehow they decide that their discomfort must become your responsibility. No, that's not how this works. You don't have to shrink because somebody else feels threatened by your growth. You don't have to make yourself smaller because someone is insecure around your confidence. You don't have to apologize for becoming disciplined simply because your discipline reminds someone else of what they keep avoiding in themselves. People may react strangely when you stop behaving according to their expectations. They may call you arrogant because you're no longer available for disrespect. They may call you selfish because you finally learned to protect your time. They may say you've changed as if changing is some terrible crime. Well, yes, you changed. That's what growth does. A tree doesn't apologize for getting taller because the person standing underneath it suddenly feels smaller. And you don't need to apologize for becoming stronger because someone else preferred the version of you that was easier to control. But here's where you need to stay intelligent. Don't turn their insecurity into your excuse to become cruel. That's not strength. If someone is jealous, you don't need to humiliate them. If someone is intimidated, you don't need to provoke them. If someone doesn't understand your choices, you don't need to punish them for it. You can simply keep your distance where necessary and continue your path. Their emotions belong to them. Your responsibility is how you respond. That's the line between confidence and arrogance. Confidence says, I know my worth. Arrogance says, I need you to know my worth. See the difference? One is internal. The other is begging for an audience. You don't need to announce your value every 5 minutes. Your consistency can demonstrate it. Your boundaries can demonstrate it. Your work can demonstrate it. Your character can demonstrate it. And if someone still refuses to recognize it, that's okay. You can't force another person to see what they're committed to misunderstanding. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop trying. Stop explaining why you're different. Stop defending every improvement. Stop giving long speeches about why you deserve respect. Respect that has to be begged for isn't much of a foundation anyway. Let people reveal how they feel through their behavior. If they support you, appreciate it. If they don't, keep moving. If they become uncomfortable because you're progressing, don't make their discomfort the center of your life. You're not here to manage everyone's emotional response to your existence. You're here to live responsibly, build wisely, and become the strongest version of yourself you can honestly become. Maybe some people will celebrate you. Maybe some will criticize you. Maybe some will quietly compare themselves to you. That's their internal conversation. You don't have to enter it. Keep your focus on what you can control, because the moment you stop treating other people's insecurity like an instruction manual for how small you should become, you begin moving differently, speaking differently, choosing differently, and protecting your future from the exhausting habit of constantly asking whether everyone around you is comfortable with the person you're becoming, while you continue growing without needing their fear to disappear before you allow yourself to move forward. Watch their actions. Seriously, words are beautiful little things. They can apologize, promise, flatter, reassure, and perform a complete emotional Broadway production before breakfast. But actions? Actions are much less cooperative. They keep exposing people. Someone can tell you they're loyal while disappearing the moment you need them. Someone can swear they're happy for you while constantly minimizing your achievements. Someone can say they respect your boundaries while repeatedly testing them just to see how much you'll tolerate. That's why you shouldn't become hypnotized by what people say about you in public or what they claim privately. Watch what they consistently do. Consistency is where the truth starts getting difficult to hide. If someone genuinely supports you, you don't need to decode every sentence. Their behavior will usually make it obvious. They celebrate your progress without turning it into competition. They respect your no without making you feel guilty. They can disagree with you without trying to destroy your confidence. They don't need you to remain small so they can feel important. And if someone repeatedly behaves differently, that's information too. You don't need to label them as evil. You don't need to create some dramatic enemy story. Just recognize that their actions aren't matching their words and adjust your expectations accordingly. That's maturity. You stop arguing with reality, because sometimes we're so attached to what someone promised that we ignore what they repeatedly demonstrate. They said they cared, so we excuse the disrespect. They said they changed, so we ignore the same behavior appearing again. They said they were proud of us, so we overlook every little attempt to undermine our confidence. Why? Because believing the words is emotionally easier than accepting the pattern, but eventually reality becomes too loud. That's when you have to choose evidence over hope. Hope is beautiful, but hope should not require you to ignore what is directly in front of you. Give people room to prove themselves. Give them time. Don't judge an entire relationship from one bad moment, but don't ignore repeated behavior either. One mistake can be human. A pattern is information. That's the difference. And when you start watching patterns, you become much harder to manipulate. Someone can't convince you they're trustworthy simply by giving a perfect apology if their behavior remains unchanged. Someone can't convince you they respect you while constantly crossing the same boundary. Someone can't convince you they support your growth if every achievement becomes an opportunity to criticize you. You don't need to argue. You don't need to expose them. You can simply observe and make decisions. Maybe you give more trust where consistency exists. Maybe you create distance where disrespect repeats. Maybe you stop sharing personal information with someone who has demonstrated that they don't handle it responsibly. These aren't punishments. They're consequences. And consequences don't need anger. They simply need clarity. That's the part that changes everything. You stop trying to force people into the role you wish they would play and start accepting the role their actions demonstrate. If someone is genuine, their behavior will eventually support their words. If someone is performing, consistency will eventually become difficult. Either way, you gain clarity, and clarity is far more valuable than a perfect explanation, because once you learn to judge situations by repeated behavior rather than promises, compliments, rumors, or carefully chosen words, you stop being so easily distracted by the performance and start seeing the person underneath it, calmly recognizing who earns trust, who deserves distance, and who simply doesn't need to occupy as much space in your life as you once allowed them to occupy, while you keep your attention on what people consistently do, instead of getting trapped inside what they claim they meant to do, because actions have a habit of telling the truth long after words have finished performing their little show. The ultimate freedom comes when you realize you don't need to be understood by everyone. Think about that for a second. How much energy have people wasted trying to control a story that was never theirs to control? Someone says something about you, and suddenly you feel like you need to explain yourself. Someone misunderstands your intentions, and you start preparing a defense. Someone criticizes your choices, and you begin questioning decisions you were completely confident about yesterday. What a strange little prison, isn't it? You're living your life while simultaneously trying to manage the imaginary audience watching it. Eventually, you have to step out of that performance. Let them think what they think. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them create whatever version of you makes sense inside their own mind. You don't have to chase every opinion and correct every misunderstanding. If someone genuinely wants to know you, they'll ask. If they genuinely care about the truth, they'll listen. And if they've already decided to misunderstand you, no explanation in the world will satisfy them. That's not your failure. That's their choice. Your responsibility is to remain honest with yourself and responsible for your actions. You don't need to become perfect because somebody is watching. You don't need to become impressive because somebody is doubting you. You don't need to become successful just to make someone regret underestimating you. Build because you want a better life. Improve because you respect your potential. Protect your peace because you finally understand how expensive constant drama can become. And here's the funny part. When you stop caring so much about people's opinions, you often become more confident, not less. You start making decisions based on values instead of reactions. You start choosing relationships based on mutual respect instead of approval. You start saying no without writing a 5-paragraph apology afterward. You start saying yes because you genuinely want to, not because you're terrified someone will be disappointed. That's freedom. Not doing whatever you want without consequences, but becoming capable of making responsible choices without needing everyone to approve of them. And when people hear things about you, you don't have to chase every rumor. If there's something important, deal with facts. If there's nothing real, keep moving. Your attention is too valuable to spend on invisible enemies and imaginary arguments. Stay grounded. Stay curious. Stay aware. But don't become consumed. The goal isn't to know every private opinion about you. The goal is to know yourself well enough that somebody else's opinion doesn't instantly rewrite your identity. If someone praises you, appreciate it without becoming addicted to it. If someone criticizes you, consider whether there's something useful without allowing the criticism to define you. If someone dislikes you, accept that not every relationship is meant to survive. That's maturity. You can walk away without hatred. You can create distance without revenge. You can succeed without humiliating anyone. You can become powerful without becoming cruel. And eventually, you realize the people who once occupied so much space in your mind have become background noise. Not because you defeated them, but because you stopped giving them the microphone. They can whisper. They can speculate. They can tell stories. They can believe whatever makes sense to them. Meanwhile, you keep building your life with your attention pointed towards something real, something measurable, something worth your energy, because the strongest version of you isn't the one who knows exactly what everyone is saying behind closed doors. It's the one who knows exactly who they are, what they stand for, where they're going, and how little another person's private opinion needs to interfere with that direction, leaving the noise where it belongs and carrying forward with enough confidence to let reality speak louder than every rumor, every whisper, every judgment, and every private conversation that was never important enough to become the author of your life.